On the surface, it seems that the song's talking about being afraid of wasting your youth, but actually it's presenting the idea that that's what being young is all about. So with that, we came up with this idea of people being trapped in space, perhaps frozen by their own fear.
Once we had this idea of people being frozen, we started thinking about how best to achieve that technically. So the rig is basically a load of pinhole cameras. It's hundreds of little boxes with a pinhole in the front that are close enough together for us to lace a strip of 35mm film all the way through, which we can then expose in one moment.
So the idea becomes looking at one moment from many perspectives, as opposed to many moments from one perspective, which you would get in a normal music video.
The maths involved in building something like this is really, really challenging.
So by way of an example, to run the film through a traditional telecine machine, each of our frames needed to be 18.96mm across. That's fairly straightforward when you're shooting in a straight camera rig, but got quite complex when we're dealing with curves. It meant calculating circumferences and
heavy use of pi.
Yeah. I think one of the most interesting things we found from the casting day was how important it was for our performers to switch off any classical training they might have. We really wanted to capture that essence of someone falling or being trapped. This shoot day was really, really hard. We started off doing a more traditional 35mm shoot with Matthias, our DP. That was a beautiful experience.
Things got a bit more challenging when we went to the second half of the shoot with our camera rig. The biggest challenge was just getting the film through the rig without exposing it. We ended up having to turn off every single light in the whole space. So we essentially made the entire room into a giant camera, and then have 7 or 8 people stood around with photographic gloves feeding the film through their hands to get it around the circular rig, for example. I think we ended up about half an hour per take.
Once we got the footage into the edit, we felt that there were a few shots that we really would like, but that we didn't have time for on the shoot day itself. Unfortunately, it was a Saturday of a bank holiday weekend, and if we wanted these shots, we were really going to have to make them ourselves.
We hatched a bit of a weird plan. We bought a load of black and white stills film. We shot with that stills film, and then we got a load of buckets and some developing chemicals, and we actually developed the film ourselves. Scrabbled around for about 2 hours in pitch black at 3 a.m. developing this film, and finally switched on the lights and there was an exposure there, so we were really chuffed.
It's actually been a really refreshing experience to shoot with a technique that is practically entirely in camera. The post side of this job after the edit was really minimal. The aesthetic has come from the process itself, as opposed to anything we've applied to it.
There's no denying that this was a fairly risky idea, but the band really got behind it and they believed in the idea and allowed us the space to really push and keep the concept quite pure.